Hey guys, this is Boo from Mile Hi Distilling. We're going to go ahead and do a pretty cool video today. We're doing a two-parter. First part is going to be going through a fermentation. We're just going to do a start to finish fermentation. We're making kind of like a shine here. Shine's a very loose term. You can make shine out of corn, make a corn shine. You can make a fruit shine. We're doing a really easy beginner recipe, sugar shine. Sugar, water, and yeast. That's our ingredients. That's a very high yield and it's a very forgiving recipe. So I recommend starting with it if you're getting in. Second part of this video is going to be running a still. So we're going to be running from start to finish through a torpedo, and we're going to be showing that later on. For now, let's get started on this fermentation. So again, our main ingredients are going to be regular sugar. This is just regular cane sugar. You can do any kind of sugar you want, really. Brown sugar, dextrose, which tends to dissolve a little bit better. But we're just going to use regular store-bought, from the grocery store sugar. And then we're going to have some 48-hour yeast. It's a really good yeast, all-purpose yeast, can do just about anything. And of course our water. So first things first, we're just going to be dumping all this sugar into our bucket. The amount of sugar is going to completely depend on your yeast. So I recommend that you look at that packaging when you get that yeast. This is 48 is a very volatile, very strong acting turbo yeast, so it requires a lot of nutrients, a lot of sugar to eat. We're going to be doing 20 pounds worth of sugar. We're not baking a cake. We're doing some straight up moonshine out of tons of this sugar. I'm just going to be pouring this into our bucket. It's going to fill about halfway in that bucket. So it's a little hard to see from your guys' end, but right now, can you see that line? That's a full line worth of sugar. About halfway through, we're about the 10-liter mark. So we got a lot of sugar in there. The next step is we're going to use our water. And what I recommend, there's a few different ways you can go about this, but we want boiling water at all times, regardless of which method you use to dissolve this sugar and get it easier to stir. So we've already pre-prepped some hot water here, and all we're going to do is pour this in and we're going to stir it. Before I do that, I want to also explain you can fill your 5.5 gallons full of hot water and just use boiling water. That's one way you can go, either through the sink or actually boil a big pot of water, or another method is a cold crash, which would basically be about half that in hot water, about 3 gallons. Then you take that remainder 2.5 gallons you need of ice cold water. And you're going to pour that over. That's going to cold crash it, because remember, we need our temperature down for our yeast to pitch. So let's just get started on here. Go ahead and get this water in. And we're past that line. So we're pretty full on this. We're going to take our spoon. I recommend having one of these around. We're just going to stir vigorously. We're going to see all that sugar start to dissolve.
Alright, so just wanted to get some close-up shots of that fermentation being stirred. You really want that masher wash to be oxygen filled as much as possible. Keep that yeast breathing during this beginning cycle. Yeast is a live colony, so that what you'll usually see is a pretty vigorous bubbling for a day or two while the yeast works off, and then pretty much just stops. Colony starts dying off, everything stops.
And before we pitch our yeast and put our lid on our bucket, we're going to take the time to do an completely optional step. That is get a hydrometer reading. I know a lot of distillers that don't do this, and that's fine, but I really like doing it, because what this will do is get you an estimated alcohol by volume. It's going to tell you exactly how much volume is in that fermenter, what you can expect out of it, as well as what will happen is you're going to take a starting gravity first, come back a week later when everything should be converted. You should have full conversion, which means this is going to be at 1.100 or 0.99. But if we did something wrong in our fermentation, we might have some residual sugars. So it could be at 1.030, and if you want the most bang for your buck, that's helpful to know if you have residual sugars, and you can sort of fix that through a starter or something like that. Reading this is pretty easy. All we're going to do is use a jar, something like that, just to fill in this molded test jar. So we're going to go about 3/4 of the way full. You don't want it all the way full, because then when you go to dump this meter in, it's obviously going to overflow. It's about 3/4 of the way full. And then simple as dropping that meter in, give it a spin to release CO2. And that's going to give you a good reading. So I think I did a little bit too much water in my fermentation. I got a little ahead of myself. I'm only pulling right now at about 13 or so percent. This could definitely go higher, about even up to 20 with our yeast. So that's okay with me. It is what it is, but you're welcome to add more sugar if your reading isn't as high as you want it to be. And one thing I want to note to you guys is I would always do this before you pitch your yeast. Sometimes that yeast can screw up your readings. So try to take it easy and do it before. And write this number down for your starting gravity. You'll come back in a week or whatever, how long your yeast takes to ferment, and take a final gravity reading. Then you run a calculation to get your estimated ABV.
Okay, so unfortunately for this part, we shot the entire video in slow-mo without realizing it killed the audio on it. This was the first video we filmed with this new camera of ours, and we just messed up. So I've sped this up, and I'm just going to talk over what's going on here. I don't really know what I was rambling about for so long on this, to be honest with you. The gist of it is that after all your other steps are done, it's as simple as just pitching your yeast. So your yeast temperature and how much will always depend on the yeast you're using. So read those directions on the package and just sprinkle over the top, stirring vigorously. We used the turbo yeast in this video, which is fast acting, but it's more volatile and has nutrients already in the yeast packet, so we end up using a lot of it. We have that airlock on top, and as the carbon dioxide that's created from the yeast eating the sugars goes up, it'll hit into our bubbler at the top, and that's what actually makes the burping of the bubbler. A bubbler bubbling isn't a surefire way to tell that your yeast is working off. Sometimes you'll just leave small pockets of air when you snap your lid on your bucket, which can make the airlock not work. And there's a few other things that can contribute to that, so take that hydrometer reading. The last step is as simple as just putting that bucket lid on as tight as possible. You fill your bubbler to the water line, and you just wait.